are we just talking about it now? Is it, something that we forgot about, but we've actually used to know in the past, and now it's sort of resurged?
And one of the things that looks like us, but isn't, of course, is Slenderman, which is something that I have never seen something take off like this in a way where we know from the outset that it's not real, but yet we've made it real.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think that was surprising for a lot of us. Even for folklorists who are used to seeing things kind of take off, we're like, wow, why is this so popular? Why this thing in particular? And I think that was really fascinating for us to watch, because we know it started, on the Something Awful forum in 2009. We know that, it has this sort of trajectory. We know all of the video games. We know the YouTube channels. We know, all the stuff that's kind of come through. But that hasn't stopped people's belief, especially when it came to doing the Photoshop, which was really interesting, too, to see how many different ways people manipulated photos to make it look like Slenderman was in them. And that was always so cool, because it was sort of a weird, Where's Waldo kind of thing sometimes, where someone would post a picture online and you'd be like, I can't find Slenderman. Where is he? But yeah, it was so amazing to see how that took off. And it may have died out, generally speaking, or for a lot of people, they didn't even know it existed until, of course, the stabbings that happened. And that kind of, brought a resurgence of at least more people sort of knowing about it. So I felt like there was a sort of a group of people who knew about it, and then it got, sort of more widespread because of the stabbings. But yeah, that was so interesting to see how people really connected with it, and that they would see these Photoshops, especially some of the Photoshops of the woodcuts, that made it look a lot older than what it really was. So it kind of became this thing of, well, are we just talking about it now? Is it, something that we forgot about, but we've actually used to know in the past, and now it's sort of resurged? And that was really kind of fascinating to see people talk about that. And even the people who accepted the fact that it was created in 2009, there was also sort of that belief that it became what was, frequently called a tulpa or an egregor or a thought form, that it was something that we, by talking about it, by acknowledging it, brought into existence, which is also a really interesting concept.
And I think that's a big part of this, is the fact that we are kind of willing it into existence. For example, here in the south coast of Massachusetts, we have the Native American Pukwudgies, which were something that the natives believed in hundreds of years ago. And then there's all these years where you could almost say, okay, maybe there wasn't a lot of sightings of them or a lot of reported sightings of them. But now that the term has come back into fashion, now all of a sudden we're seeing more sightings of these, almost because we're willing them into existence by talking about them. And I think that does happen with these things.
Yeah, it's really this interesting idea. Folklorists sometimes talk about the cultural source hypothesis and the experiential source hypothesis. And for a long time, a lot of people really believed that we had supernatural experiences because we had stories. So we'd hear the story, and then, we'd get scared in the middle of the night. We'd think we saw something, but it was because of the story. But actually, people have experiences, right? And sometimes they don't know the stories. This is really common with sleep paralysis. So people will have, sleep paralysis episodes where they wake up in the middle of the night, they're unable to move. Sometimes they see something, and they won't tell anybody about it for years. But then they later on find out that there's all these stories about this. And for a lot of people, that actually makes them feel a lot better, because they realize it's not just them, they're not going crazy. But that it's actually the experience that starts before the story. So it does kind of get into that question of, in some ways, which came first. And of course, in some cases, it's both. Sometimes, you hear about this stuff and then you have the experience. But other times, the experience comes first without even knowing anything about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting way to think about it, instead of just sort of blaming stories on it, thinking of it as, well, people had the experience and that's where the stories came from.
I did have somebody mention to me once before, when the stabbings took place and Slenderman was kind of in the news for all of that. And I work in news, so people are constantly, when news stories come up about weird stuff, they're always asking me what I think about it. And so somebody at the newspaper where I worked asked me, is this the first time that you can remember where somebody's superstition or belief in the supernatural led them to do something like this? And I was like, well, no, there was a little something that happened in Salem in 1692 that was probably a little bit more egregious than this, but it has been something that people have taken these beliefs to an extreme and actually done harm to other people over them.